The ice in the whiskey glass clinked softly against crystal as I wiped down the mahogany bar for the third time in an hour. My reflection stared back at me from the polished surface, dark circles prominent under my eyes despite the careful concealer I'd applied that morning. The velvet crown never truly slept, but these early evening hours before the real crowd arrived were my favorite. A brief respite before the chaos of another night serving drinks to men who looked through me like I was invisible. Except for one man. But I couldn't think about him right now. My fingers trembled slightly as I reached for the next glass, the weight of exhaustion pressing down on my shoulders. 3 years I'd been working here. 3 years of double shifts and borrowed money just to keep my small apartment. 3 years of watching the city's most dangerous men conduct business in velvet booths, while I pretended not to hear their conversations. 3 years of surviving, not living. The leather-bound journal in my locker called to me like a siren song. My dirty secret, my confession booth, the one place where I could be honest about everything I saw, everything I felt, especially about him, Sebastian Dante. The name alone made my pulse quicken, a Pavlovian response I'd developed over countless nights of watching him move through his kingdom with the casual grace of a predator who knew he had no equals. I shouldn't write about him. I definitely shouldn't write about the way his dark eyes seemed to see straight through the careful walls I'd built around myself, and I absolutely shouldn't document the increasingly dangerous observations I'd made while working in his club. But the journal was my only outlet, my only friend in a city that had chewed me up and spit me out more times than I could count. Sarah, table 7 needs another round. Marco, the floor manager, appeared at my elbow, his voice cutting through my thoughts. And Mr. Dante wants to see you in his office before the evening rush. My heart stuttered. Sebastian wanted to see me? In 3 years, I'd maybe exchanged 20 words with the man directly. He existed in a different stratosphere, surrounded by beautiful women in designer dresses and men who radiated danger like a physical force. I was just the tired waitress who showed up on time and kept her mouth shut. Did he say what about? I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. Marco shrugged, his expression unreadable. Boss doesn't explain himself to me. 10 minutes, Sarah. Don't keep him waiting. I nodded, my mind already racing through possibilities. Had I done something wrong? Overheard something I shouldn't have? The memory of 3 months ago flashed through my mind, unwanted and visceral. The sound of a gunshot in the parking lot behind the club. Vincent Rossi's cold smile as he'd walked back inside, adjusting his cufflinks like he'd just finished a business meeting instead of ending a man's life. I'd been taking out the trash, had seen everything through the gap in the service door. I'd written about it in my journal that night, the words spilling out in a desperate attempt to process what I'd witnessed. But no one knew I'd seen it. I'd been careful, so careful. I delivered the drinks to table 7 with mechanical precision, my mind elsewhere. The velvet crown was already beginning to fill with its usual clientele. Politicians rubbing shoulders with known criminals, businessmen making deals that would never see the light of legal scrutiny, women who cost more per hour than I made in a week. This was Sebastian's world, and I was just a ghost moving through it. The walk to his office felt like a death march. My sensible black flats made no sound on the plush carpet as I climbed the stairs to the private floor. 2 of Sebastian's security team flanked his door, their expressions neutral, but their eyes sharp as they assessed me. I'd seen these men before, knew they were the kind who followed orders without question, whose loyalty was purchased with money and fear in equal measure. "He's expecting you," the taller one said, opening the door without knocking. Sebastian Dante sat behind a massive desk of dark wood, the city skyline spread out behind him through floor-to-ceiling windows. He didn't look up immediately, his attention focused on something in his hands. Even in profile, he was devastating. Sharp jawline, dark hair swept back from a face that belonged on Roman statues. And those eyes. God, those eyes that had haunted my dreams for longer than I cared to admit. Then I saw what he was holding, and my blood turned to ice. My journal, My private, personal, incredibly incriminating journal. Close the door, Sarah. His voice was smooth, cultured, with just a hint of an accent that suggested old money and older secrets. Not a request. Never a request from a man like Sebastian Dante. I obeyed on autopilot, my mind frantically trying to remember where I'd left it. The office. I'd been called up here 2 days ago to deliver paperwork from Marco, and I'd set my bag down while I organized the files. I must have left it behind when the phone rang and Marco called me back downstairs urgently. "Do you know what this is?" Sebastian asked, finally looking up at me. Those dark eyes were unreadable, his expression giving nothing away. "It's mine," I whispered, my voice barely audible. "I'm sorry. I didn't mean to leave it here. It won't happen again." "No," he agreed softly. "It won't." He stood, moving around the desk with predatory grace. "Because we're going to discuss what's written in here. Every word of it." My hands clenched into fists at my sides, nails digging into my palms. Did he know about Vincent? About what I'd seen? Or worse, had he read the entries about him? The pages and pages of observations and feelings I'd poured out like a lovesick teenager? Sebastian leaned back against his desk, close enough that I could smell his cologne, expensive and subtle. He opened the journal to a marked page, and I recognized my handwriting immediately. "Vincent Rossi," he read aloud, his tone conversational. "Sebastian's right-hand man. Killed a man in the parking lot tonight." I saw everything. The way he moved, practiced and efficient. The way he checked his watch afterward, like he had a schedule to keep. The body was gone within an hour. I should report this. I should go to the police. But I know what happens to people who cross these men. I know what happens to witnesses. The words hung in the air between us. I'd written them 3 months ago, in the small hours of the morning when sleep wouldn't come, and the image of a life ending kept playing behind my closed eyelids. "You saw Vincent kill someone," Sebastian said, closing the journal. Not a question, a statement of fact. I nodded, unable to form words around the terror constricting my throat. "And you didn't think to mention this to anyone?" "To me." "I wanted to stay alive," I managed, my voice shaking. "I have student loans, medical bills from when my mom was sick. I can't afford to disappear. But I also can't afford to make enemies of men who make people disappear." Something flickered in Sebastian's expression, too quick to identify. Practical, if not particularly brave. "I'm a waitress, Mr. Dante. Not a hero." He studied me for a long moment, his gaze intense enough to make me want to look away. I forced myself to maintain eye contact, to not show the fear that was making my heart race and my hands tremble. "Your mother," he said finally. "The medical bills. Cancer?" The unexpected question threw me. "How did you—" "I make it my business to know about the people who work for me, Sarah. Pancreatic cancer, stage 4. She passed 18 months ago. The hospital bills were substantial, and your insurance didn't cover half of what she needed. You've been working double shifts here and at the diner on Morrison Street, trying to pay down debt that would take you 20 years to clear at your current rate." I stared at him, stunned that he knew so much about my life, about the struggles I'd carefully hidden behind a professional smile and efficient service. "I pay attention," Sebastian continued, setting the journal down on his desk, "to everything that happens in my club. Every conversation, every transaction, every employee who might become a liability or an asset. You've been here 3 years, Sarah. Never late, never complained, never caused problems. Until now." "I didn't cause problems," I protested weakly. "I just forgot my journal. It won't happen again. I'll destroy it. You'll do no such thing." His voice cut through my babbling with quiet authority. "Because this journal is the only thing keeping you alive right now." The words hit me like a physical blow. What? Sebastian moved to the window, his back to me as he gazed out at the city he controlled. Vincent Rossi has been planning a coup. He wants my territory, my connections, my empire. He's been building alliances with my enemies, making promises he'll never keep, setting pieces in motion to destroy everything I've built. And he's been very careful about it. I listened in stunned silence as Sebastian continued, his voice eerily calm. What Vincent didn't know is that I've been aware of his betrayal for months. I've been letting him think he was succeeding, letting him expose his co-conspirators, letting him hang himself with his own rope. But I needed proof. Evidence that would justify what I'm about to do to him and everyone involved in his little rebellion. He turned back to face me, and the look in his eyes made me take an involuntary step backward. Your journal provides that proof, Sarah. You witnessed Vincent committing murder. You documented it in detail. Date, time, location. Even described what the victim was wearing. That kind of specificity is invaluable. I don't want to be involved in this, I said desperately. I just want to keep my head down and pay my bills. Whatever's happening between you and Vincent, it has nothing to do with me. It has everything to do with you now. Sebastian picked up the journal again, flipping to another marked page. Because Vincent knows you saw him. He's known for 3 months. The room spun. That's impossible. I've been so careful. You wrote about it in a journal you brought to work every day. A journal you left in your locker, which Vincent's people have access to. A journal you've been writing in during your breaks, in full view of security cameras he monitors. You were careful about not speaking up, Sarah, but you weren't careful enough about documenting your silence. Horror washed over me as the implications sank in. He's going to kill me. He was going to kill you, Sebastian corrected. As part of his coup. You were going to be his insurance policy, his leverage against me. He planned to use you as a witness, to claim I ordered the hit he committed. Your testimony, coerced or fabricated, would have been enough to bring law enforcement attention I can't afford. It was a clever plan, actually, using my own employee against me. My legs gave out, and I sank into the chair behind me. I need to run. I need to leave the city, change my name. You need to stay right here, Sebastian interrupted, his tone brooking no argument. Under my protection. Because if you run, Vincent will find you. If you hide, his people will hunt you down. Your only chance of survival is to remain exactly where you are, doing exactly what you've been doing, while I handle Vincent and his conspiracy. Handle? The word felt heavy on my tongue. Sebastian's smile was cold, deadly. I'm going to eliminate every single person who betrayed me, Sarah. Vincent, his allies, anyone who thought they could take what's mine. It's going to be bloody, and it's going to be final. And when it's done, you'll be safe. And if I refuse, if I go to the police right now? He moved with startling speed, suddenly close enough that I could feel the heat radiating from his body. Then you'll be dead before you reach the parking lot. Vincent has people everywhere, including in the police department. The moment you walk into a station, he'll know. And he'll act. I was trapped. Completely, utterly trapped between 2 dangerous men playing a game I didn't understand with rules I'd never learned. Why are you telling me all this? I asked, my voice barely a whisper. Why not just use me without explaining? Why give me a choice at all? Sebastian reached out, his fingers gentle as they tilted my chin up, forcing me to meet his gaze. Because despite what you might think, Sarah, I'm not a monster. I don't hurt innocents. I don't use people without their knowledge. And because... He paused, something vulnerable flickering across his features before his control reasserted itself. Because I read the rest of your journal. All of it. Oh God. The entries about him. The pages and pages of observations and feelings I'd never meant for anyone to see. the confession I'd written just last week. "The last entry," Sebastian continued, his voice softer now. "Do you remember what you wrote?" I closed my eyes, humiliation burning through me. I remembered. Every word was seared into my memory. "I love him," I whispered, repeating what I'd written. "Even knowing what he is. Even knowing it could destroy me. I love Sebastian Dante, and that's the most dangerous secret I'm keeping." The silence that followed was deafening. I waited for him to laugh, to mock me, to use my feelings as another weapon in his arsenal. Instead, his thumb traced the line of my jaw with unexpected tenderness. "Open your eyes, Sarah." I obeyed, and found him looking at me with an expression I'd never seen before. Something raw and honest that made my breath catch. "I didn't freeze when I read about Vincent's crime," Sebastian said quietly. "I froze when I read those words. Because I've been watching you for 3 years, Sarah Mitchell. Wondering why you never seem to see me the way every other woman in this club does. Wondering why you never asked for favors or special treatment. Wondering how someone could survive in this world while maintaining the kind of integrity that shines from every page of this journal." My heart hammered against my ribs. "What are you saying?" "I'm saying that your feelings aren't one-sided. They never were. I just didn't think I had the right to act on mine. You deserved better than a man who operates in the shadows, who builds empires on blood and fear. You deserved someone who could give you a normal life, a safe life." "I never wanted safe," I breathed. "I wanted real." His lips curved into the first genuine smile I'd ever seen from him, and it transformed his entire face. "Then we're going to have a very complicated relationship, because nothing about my life is simple." Before I could respond, before I could process the impossible reality of Sebastian Dante confessing feelings for me, his phone buzzed. He glanced at it, and his expression hardened instantly. "Vincent just arrived. He's asking for you. He knows about the journal." Fear spiked through me, but Sebastian's hand on my shoulder steadied me. "Stay here. Don't leave this office. Don't open the door for anyone except me. Do you understand?" I nodded, unable to form words. Sebastian moved to the door, then paused, looking back at me. "This ends tonight, Sarah. One way or another. And when it's over, we're going to have a very long conversation about everything written in that journal. Every observation, every feeling, every secret you've been keeping." "Sebastian," I called out as he opened the door. He turned, eyebrow raised in question. "Be careful." His smile this time was all predator. "I'm always careful. It's everyone else who should be worried." The door closed behind him, leaving me alone in his office with my journal, and the stunning revelation that the man I'd loved from a distance had been watching me just as closely. But as I heard raised voices from downstairs, the sounds of confrontation beginning, I realized that confession might have come too late. Because Vincent Rossi was here, and he wanted me dead, and Sebastian Dante had just walked into a war to protect me. The office felt smaller once Sebastian left, the walls seeming to close in as I listened to the muffled sounds from below. My heart hammered against my ribs, each beat a reminder that I was trapped 3 floors above a confrontation that would determine whether I lived or died. I moved to the window, pressing my palm against the cool glass as I stared out at the city lights, trying to steady my breathing. 3 years. 3 years of careful invisibility, of keeping my head down and my observations to myself. And one forgotten journal had shattered everything. My phone buzzed in my pocket. I pulled it out with trembling hands, half expecting a threat from Vincent or one of his people. Instead, it was a text from Melissa, my roommate. "Working late again? Don't forget rent's due tomorrow. Still short, $200. I closed my eyes against the familiar weight of financial anxiety, Even in the middle of what might be my last night alive, the mundane concerns of survival pressed in. The medical bills from Mom's final months, the student loans from a degree I'd never finished, the credit card debt that had accumulated during the 6 months I'd spent as her caretaker instead of working full shifts. Sebastian knew about all of it. He'd said as much. The thought should have unsettled me. The invasion of privacy, the surveillance. But instead, I felt something unexpected. Relief. Someone finally saw me. Really saw me. Not just the smiling waitress who brought drinks and kept secrets. A crash from downstairs made me jump. Glass shattering, followed by raised voices. I couldn't make out words, but I recognized Sebastian's voice, cold and controlled even in confrontation. And Vincent's response, sharp with anger. I should have been terrified. I was terrified, but underneath the fear was something else entirely. Sebastian had read my journal, had read every foolish, honest word I'd written about him, the way his presence changed the air in a room, the careful attention he paid to details others missed, the moments when I'd caught him looking at me with an expression I couldn't interpret, before his mask of indifference slid back into place. And he'd said my feelings weren't one-sided. My fingers traced the edge of his desk, solid mahogany that probably cost more than my entire year's salary. Everything in this office spoke of power and control, from the leather furniture to the original artwork on the walls. Sebastian Dante had built an empire, and I was just a waitress who'd stumbled into the middle of his war. But I wasn't helpless. Not entirely. I moved to his desk, where my journal still lay open to that damning entry about Vincent. My handwriting stared back at me, evidence of the one time I hadn't been careful enough. But as I flipped through the pages, I realized something. This journal wasn't just documentation of Vincent's crime. It was a chronicle of everything I'd observed over 3 years of working at the Velvet Crown. I'd written about deals made in whispered conversations, about men who visited regularly, and the patterns in their behavior, about the subtle hierarchy among Sebastian's employees and associates, about shipments that arrived at odd hours, and guests who entered through the back entrance to avoid cameras. I'd been collecting intelligence without even realizing it. Every observation, every detail I'd recorded in an attempt to process the dangerous world I'd found myself in. It was all here. And if Sebastian could use my witnessing of Vincent's murder as evidence of betrayal, then perhaps there was more in these pages that could help him, or that could destroy him if it fell into the wrong hands. The thought sent ice through my veins. Vincent must have known. Must have realized that my journal contained far more than just one inconvenient murder. That's why he wanted me dead. Why I was part of his coup. Not just as a witness against Sebastian, but as someone who'd documented things that could bring down the entire operation. I heard footsteps on the stairs, heavy and purposeful. Multiple people. My breath caught as I backed away from the desk, looking frantically for somewhere to hide. The office was too open, too exposed. The only door led to the hallway, and I'd been ordered not to leave. The footsteps stopped outside the door. A long pause, then a knock. Not Sebastian's authoritative knock, but something lighter. Hesitant. "Sarah?" A woman's voice, familiar but unexpected. "It's Julia. I need to talk to you." Julia Martinez, one of the other waitresses. We'd shared shifts for 2 years, had traded stories about difficult customers, and commiserated over sore feet during smoke breaks. I'd always liked her, appreciated her straightforward manner and dark humor about the world we worked in, but I'd been told not to open the door for anyone except Sebastian. "Julia, I can't," I called back, my voice shaking slightly. Mr. Dante said, "I know what he said, but Sarah, you need to hear this. Vincent's people are coming. They're going to break down this door in about 3 minutes, and Sebastian's tied up downstairs. I'm trying to help you." My hand hovered over the doorknob. Could I trust her? Should I trust anyone in this building right now? "How do I know you're not working with Vincent?" I asked, pressing my ear against the door. A pause. Then Julia's voice, lower and more urgent. Because Vincent killed my brother 6 months ago. Made it look like a robbery gone wrong. I've been waiting for the right moment to take him down, and apparently, you've been documenting evidence that could help do exactly that. The revelation hit me like a physical blow. Julia's brother, Marcus. I remembered when she'd taken a week off for the funeral, had come back quiet and withdrawn. I'd attributed it to grief, never imagining there was a darker story beneath. "I'm sorry," I whispered. "I didn't know." "Of course you didn't. That's the point. We all keep our secrets in this place. But right now, your secrets and mine might be the only things that keep us both alive. Please, Sarah, open the door." I glanced at the journal on Sebastian's desk, at the evidence of 3 years of careful observation. At the truth, I'd been too afraid to speak aloud, but had poured onto pages in the quiet hours of the night. Against every instinct screaming at me to follow Sebastian's orders, I unlocked the door. Julia slipped inside quickly, closing and locking it behind her. She was in her work uniform like me, but her usually neat appearance was disheveled. Her dark hair had come loose from its bun, and there was a wild look in her eyes that I'd never seen before. "Where is it?" she asked, moving toward the desk. "The journal Sebastian was reading?" I stepped between her and the desk, sudden doubt flooding through me. "How did you know about the journal?" "Sebastian told me. Downstairs, while Vincent was making his threats. He said you had documentation of Vincent's crimes, that you were the key to exposing the conspiracy." Julia's eyes were intense, desperate. "Sarah, we don't have much time. Vincent's men are clearing the club. Everyone's being sent home except the ones loyal to him. In a few minutes, this is going to turn into a bloodbath, and we're both targets. Why would Sebastian tell you about the journal? Why would he trust you with that information?" Julia's expression softened slightly. "Because I've been his informant for 6 months. After Marcus died, I went to Sebastian, told him I knew Vincent was responsible and that I'd do anything to help take him down. He put me in position to watch Vincent, to report on his movements and meetings. Everything I've learned, every detail about the coup, I've fed back to Sebastian. It made sense. Perfect sense. But something still felt wrong. Some instinct that had kept me alive and unnoticed for 3 years was screaming at me to be careful. If you're Sebastian's informant, why didn't he mention you? When he was explaining everything about Vincent's betrayal. Julia moved closer, her voice taking on an edge. Because he's protecting me. The fewer people who know I'm involved, the safer I am. But Sarah, we're running out of time. Give me the journal. I need to get it somewhere safe before Vincent's people break in here." I glanced at the journal, then back at Julia. Her hand had moved to her pocket, and I caught a glimpse of something metal. A gun. "You're not Sebastian's informant," I said quietly, pieces clicking into place. "You're working with Vincent." Julia's expression hardened, and she pulled out the weapon, pointing it at me with a steady hand. "Smart girl. Too smart for your own good. Marcus wasn't my brother. He was Vincent's accountant, and he was stealing. Vincent made an example of him, and I learned very quickly which side of this war I needed to be on." My blood turned to ice. "Sebastian trusted you." "Sebastian trusted a performance. I'm a very good actress." She gestured with the gun toward the desk. "The journal. Now. Vincent wants it, and every second you delay, the more creative he gets with his punishment ideas." I didn't move toward the desk. Instead, I took a step back, mind racing through options. The window was bulletproof glass. Sebastian had mentioned it once, explaining the security measures in his office. The door was locked, but Julia could shoot me and take the journal before anyone responded to the gunshot. "Vincent's going to lose," I said, stalling for time. "Sebastian knows about the conspiracy. He's been 10 steps ahead this entire time." Julia laughed, a brittle sound. Is that what he told you? Sarah, Sebastian's good, but he's not that good. Vincent has the mayor, half the police force, and 3 of Sebastian's oldest allies on his side. By morning, Sebastian Dante will be dead, and Vincent Rossi will control everything. The only question is whether you die with him, or whether you're smart enough to hand over that journal and disappear. If I give you the journal, Vincent will kill me anyway. I'm a witness. I know too much. True, Julia agreed with a casual shrug. But it'll be quick instead of slow. That's the best deal you're going to get. The sound of gunfire erupted from downstairs. Multiple shots in rapid succession, followed by screams and chaos. Julia's attention flickered toward the door for just a second, and I lunged for the desk, grabbing the journal and throwing it with all my strength at the window. It bounced off harmlessly. Bulletproof meant bookproof too. But the distraction was enough for me to dive behind the desk as Julia fired. The bullet struck the leather chair where I'd been standing, stuffing exploding from the impact. You stupid! Julia's curse was cut off as the office door splintered inward. Not Vincent's men. Sebastian, with blood on his white shirt and murder in his eyes. He moved with terrifying speed, disarming Julia before she could swing the gun toward him. The weapon clattered to the floor, and Sebastian's hand closed around her throat, lifting her slightly off the ground. How long? He asked, his voice devoid of emotion. How long have you been betraying me? Julia clawed at his hand, gasping for air. Since the beginning. Vincent recruited me before I even applied here. I was always his. Sebastian's grip tightened. I saw Julia's face turning red, saw the life starting to drain from her eyes, and despite everything, despite the gun, despite the betrayal, I couldn't watch someone die in front of me. Sebastian, don't! I called out from behind the desk. Please. He looked at me, something almost surprised in his expression, as if he'd forgotten I was there, or as if he was surprised I'd speak up at all. She tried to kill you, he said calmly, still holding Julia suspended. She was going to take your journal to Vincent, and then they were going to take you apart piece by piece until you told them everything you knew. I know. But if you kill her like this, you're no different than Vincent, than all of them. I stood on shaking legs, moving around the desk. You said you don't hurt innocents. Well, I'm not innocent anymore. I've seen too much, know too much. And if you kill her while I watch, you'll be showing me exactly who you really are. The silence stretched between us, heavy with unspoken implications. Finally, Sebastian released Julia, letting her crumple to the floor, gasping and coughing. Dimitri, Sebastian called out, and one of his security team appeared in the doorway. Take Miss Martinez to the basement. Lock her in the storage room. I'll deal with her after Vincent is handled. As Dimitri hauled Julia away, her eyes met mine. There was hatred there, and promise of retribution if she ever got the chance. I'd made an enemy by asking for mercy, but I could live with that better than I could live with watching someone die. Sebastian moved to me, his hands gentle as they framed my face, checking for injuries. Did she hurt you? No, I'm okay. I wasn't okay. I was shaking, adrenaline crashing through my system. But I was alive. The journal. His eyes swept the office, locating it near the window where it had fallen. I threw it, tried to break the window. A slightly hysterical laugh escaped me. Forgot about the bulletproof glass. His thumb traced my cheekbone, the gesture achingly tender from a man who'd just been prepared to commit murder. You saved her life. Why? Because you're not a monster, Sebastian. You said so yourself. And I needed to believe that. Needed to know that the man I wrote about in that journal, the one I fell in love with, actually exists. Something shifted in his expression. A crack in the controlled facade he showed the world. He exists. But Sarah, he's also the man who's about to go downstairs and kill Vincent Rossi and everyone who sided with him. That man exists too. They're the same person. I understood what he was telling me. The choice I was facing. Love came with consequences when you fell for someone like Sebastian Dante. I know, I said simply. I've always known. More gunfire from below. Closer now. Sebastian's jaw tightened. I need to finish this. Vincent's made his move, and I need to end it permanently. Then go. I stepped back, releasing him. But Sebastian, come back, because we have that conversation to finish. He retrieved my journal from the floor, pressing it into my hands. Keep this safe. Keep yourself safe. No matter what you hear, no matter how long it takes, you stay in this office until I come for you. How will I know it's really you? That Vincent hasn't won? Sebastian leaned in, his lips brushing against my ear as he whispered 3 words that made my heart stutter. I love you. Then he was gone, and I was alone again with my journal and the echoing sounds of a war being fought in the floors below. I sank into Sebastian's chair, clutching the journal to my chest as I listened to the chaos unfolding. Gunshots, shouts, the thundering of footsteps, the shattering of glass. Every sound made me flinch, made me imagine Sebastian falling, bleeding, dying while I sat safe in his office. The minutes crawled by with agonizing slowness. I tried to focus on breathing, on staying calm, on believing that Sebastian would return, that this wasn't the last time I'd see him alive. I opened the journal to a blank page and began to write. If this is my last entry, if Vincent wins, and I don't survive what comes next, I want it recorded that I regret nothing. Not the observations that put me in danger. Not the feelings I developed for a dangerous man. Not the choice to stay and fight instead of running when I had the chance. Sebastian Dante is everything the rumors say he is. Ruthless, powerful, dangerous, but he's also everything my journal documented over 3 years of watching him. Fair to his employees. Protective of those under his care. A man who built an empire but maintained a code of honor in a world without rules. I love him. And if that's the truth that destroys me, at least it's my truth. The gunfire stopped. The abrupt silence was somehow worse than the noise had been. I set down my pen, straining to hear anything that would tell me what had happened. Footsteps on the stairs. Slow, measured. A single person. The door opened, and my heart stopped. Sebastian stood in the doorway, blood splattered across his shirt and face, a cut above his left eyebrow slowly dripping crimson. But he was alive, standing, looking at me with those dark eyes that had haunted my dreams. It's done, he said simply. Vincent's dead. So are the others who betrayed me. I should have been horrified, should have recoiled from the evidence of violence written across his body. Instead, I set down the journal and crossed to him, my hands shaking as I reached up to touch his face, needing to confirm he was real. You're hurt. I've had worse. His hands covered mine, pressing them against his jaw. You're still here. Where else would I be? You told me to stay. You could have run, should have run. There were moments down there when I thought Vincent might win, thought you'd be smarter than to wait for a dead man. I met his gaze steadily. I told you, I never wanted safe. I wanted real. Sebastian's control finally cracked. He pulled me against him, his arms wrapping around me with desperate strength. I felt him shaking, felt the adrenaline and fear and relief coursing through him in waves. I read every page while I was searching for you, he whispered against my hair. Every observation, every thought, every confession. 3 years of watching me the way I've been watching you. 3 years of seeing past the monster to whatever's underneath. There's no monster, I said, pulling back enough to look at him. Just a man doing what he has to do to protect what's his. And are you mine, Sarah Mitchell? After everything you've seen tonight, everything you know about what I am and what I do, are you still mine? I thought about the journal in my hands, about every honest word I'd written, about the man who'd killed to protect me, who'd read my private thoughts and responded with confession instead of mockery, about the choice I was making and the consequences that would follow. I've been yours since the first night I worked here, I admitted. I just didn't know if you'd want me. His kiss was answer enough, fierce and claiming and full of 3 years of restrained desire finally unleashed. When we broke apart, both breathing hard, his forehead rested against mine. We need to leave. The police will be here soon, and there are questions I don't want you subjected to. Come with me. Where? Does it matter? I thought about my cramped apartment, my crushing debt, my dead-end life of double shifts and borrowed time. Thought about the journal full of observations about a man who terrified and fascinated me in equal measure. No, I said, making my choice. It doesn't matter, as long as I'm with you. Sebastian's smile was genuine, transforming his blood-splattered face into something almost beautiful. Then let's go home. As he led me out of the office, past the carnage of his war with Vincent, toward a future I couldn't predict and probably shouldn't want, I clutched my journal to my chest. Evidence of my feelings, my observations, my truth. The diary I shouldn't have left behind had nearly gotten me killed, but it had also given me something I'd never expected to find in the darkness of the Velvet Crown. It had given me love. Sebastian's penthouse was nothing like I'd imagined. In my journal entries, I'd speculated about what his private sanctuary might look like. Cold marble, severe furniture, the kind of impersonal luxury that spoke of wealth but not warmth. Instead, I found myself in a space that was surprisingly lived in, with worn leather furniture, bookshelves overflowing with volumes in multiple languages, and artwork that looked collected over years rather than purchased by an interior designer in a single afternoon. The bathroom is through there, Sebastian said, gesturing to a hallway off the main living area. There are clean towels in the cabinet. Take your time. I need to make some calls. I nodded mutely, still processing the last 2 hours. The drive from the Velvet Crown had been silent, Sebastian's hand holding mine with bruising intensity while his other hand remained steady on the wheel. We'd passed 3 police cars headed in the opposite direction, their sirens wailing into the night. I'd tensed, waiting for them to turn around, to pursue us. But Sebastian had simply squeezed my hand and kept driving. Now, standing in his home with my uniform still stained with the sweat of fear and my hands still trembling from adrenaline crash, reality was beginning to set in. I'd just witnessed a war. Had watched Sebastian Dante eliminate his enemies with the cold efficiency of a man who'd done it before. Had chosen to stay with him despite, or perhaps because of, everything I'd seen. The bathroom was all black marble and chrome, with a rainfall shower that looked like it could fit 3 people. I caught sight of myself in the mirror, and barely recognized the woman staring back. My carefully applied makeup was smeared, my eyes too wide, my expression shell-shocked. The journal was still clutched against my chest like a shield. I set it on the marble counter and turned on the shower, letting the room fill with steam as I slowly peeled off my uniform. The fabric reeked of the club, cigarette smoke, spilled alcohol, fear sweat. I wanted it gone, wanted every reminder of this night scrubbed from my skin. The hot water was a revelation, pounding against my tense muscles with enough force to hurt in the best way. I stood under the spray for what felt like hours, watching the water swirl down the drain and trying to organize my scattered thoughts. Sebastian had said he loved me, had read 3 years of my private observations and confessions, and responded not with disgust or mockery, but with reciprocation. The man I'd documented from a distance, the one I'd convinced myself would never notice a waitress drowning in debt and desperation, had been watching me with the same intensity I'd watched him. It felt impossible, surreal, Like any moment I'd wake up in my cramped apartment to discover this was all some elaborate stress dream. But the cut on my arm from where Julia's bullet had grazed me was real enough. The memory of Sebastian's face as he'd killed Vincent was real enough. The journal sitting on the counter, evidence of my dangerous honesty, was devastatingly real. I heard a soft knock on the door. "Sarah, I'm leaving clothes outside. They'll be too big, but they're clean." "Thank you," I called back, my voice echoing off the marble. A pause. "Are you okay?" Was I? I'd just watched people die, had my life threatened, had everything I knew about my existence upended in the span of a few hours. But standing here in Sebastian Dante's shower, with the promise of his protection and the weight of his confession still settling into my bones, I found myself answering honestly. "I will be." Another pause. Longer this time. "Take as long as you need." When I finally emerged from the bathroom, wrapped in a towel with my hair dripping, I found Sebastian's dress shirt and a pair of sweatpants waiting outside the door. The shirt was clearly expensive, the kind of fabric that whispered against skin. I pulled it on, rolling up the sleeves several times, and stepped into the pants that were comically large on my frame. Sebastian was in the kitchen, his back to me as he worked at the stove. He'd changed as well, now wearing black pants and a simple white t-shirt that clung to the muscles of his back. The domesticity of the scene was jarring after the violence of the evening. "I wasn't sure if you'd eaten," he said without turning around. "It's just pasta, nothing fancy." I moved closer, drawn by the normalcy of the moment. "You cook," my grandmother insisted. Said a man who couldn't feed himself was barely a man at all. He glanced over his shoulder, and something flickered in his eyes when he saw me in his clothes. "The shirt suits you." I pulled the collar closer, suddenly self-conscious. Everything that happened tonight, the police, the bodies, won't there be an investigation? Sebastian stirred the pasta with practiced efficiency. "The Velvet Crown will be closed for a week. Tragic electrical fire that started in the basement. Several employees were caught in the blaze, couldn't be saved. By the time the fire department arrived, the damage was too extensive to determine much beyond the official cause." The casual way he described covering up multiple murders should have terrified me. Instead, I found myself morbidly curious about the mechanics of it all. "And Julia, the others you locked up. Gone. They made their choices, Sarah. They sided with Vincent knowing what it would mean if he failed. He plated the pasta with movements that spoke of long practice. Come sit. You need to eat something." I took a seat at the kitchen island, watching as he set a plate in front of me. The pasta was simple: garlic, olive oil, fresh herbs, but the aroma made my stomach growl. I couldn't remember the last time I'd eaten. Sebastian sat across from me, his own plate untouched as he watched me take the first bite. The food was perfect, flavorful without being heavy, exactly what my shocked system needed. "Tell me about your grandmother," I said, needing to fill the silence with something normal. "The one who taught you to cook." His expression softened in a way I'd never seen. "Nonna Maria. She came from Sicily when she was 16, married my grandfather within 6 months. Didn't speak English for 10 years, but ran the neighborhood through sheer force of personality." He paused, something like fondness crossing his features. "She taught me that power comes in many forms. Sometimes it's in knowing how to comfort someone with food. Sometimes it's in knowing when to show mercy and when to eliminate a threat. She knew about your business. She was my business for a long time. Nonna ran numbers and loan operations out of her kitchen for 40 years. Everyone in the neighborhood came to her with their problems, and she solved them her way. By the time she retired, I'd learned everything I needed to know about loyalty and consequence." I tried to reconcile the image of an elderly Italian woman cooking Sunday dinner with the criminal empire she'd apparently controlled. "Is she still alive?" "She passed 5 years ago, insisted on dying at home, in her own bed, surrounded by family. Made me promise I'd look after the neighborhood, keep the old ways alive while adapting to the new world. Sebastian's hand moved to the pendant around his neck, a small gold cross I'd noticed before but never questioned. This was hers. Only thing of value she owned, and she left it to me instead of my cousins. Said I'd need the protection more than they would. The vulnerability in his voice made my chest ache. This was the Sebastian I'd written about in my journal. The man beneath the ruthless exterior. The one who honored his promises and protected what was his with fierce devotion. She would have liked you, he said quietly, his eyes meeting mine. Would have said you had spine. Coming from Nonna, that was the highest compliment. I'm not sure I have spine. I'm terrified right now. Good. Fear means you understand the situation, means you're smart enough to recognize danger. He reached across the island, his fingers brushing mine. But you're still here. That's spine. I thought about my journal, still sitting in the bathroom where I'd left it. 3 years of observations, of carefully documented details about Sebastian's world. All those entries I wrote, the ones about your business meetings, the people who visited the club, the patterns I noticed. I never meant to collect intelligence. I was just trying to make sense of what I was seeing. I know. That's what makes it valuable. You weren't looking for specific information, so you noticed everything instead of focusing on what you thought was important. Random observations that, when put together, create a complete picture of my operations. Sebastian's expression grew serious. Vincent wasn't wrong about that journal being dangerous. In the wrong hands, it could destroy everything I've built. Fear spiked through me. Are you saying I'm a liability? No. I'm saying you're someone I need to protect. Someone I want to protect. He stood, moving around the island to stand beside me. Sarah, what happened tonight changed everything. Vincent's people knew about you, knew about the journal. Even with him gone, there will be others who come looking for answers, for revenge, for advantage. I set down my fork, my appetite vanishing. You're saying I can't go back to my normal life? You never really had a normal life, did you? Working double shifts to pay off impossible debt, barely sleeping, constantly one emergency away from homelessness. His hand cupped my face, gentle despite the violence those same hands had committed hours ago. Let me give you something better. Not as payment for the journal, not as obligation, but because I've spent 3 years wanting you and convincing myself you were better off without me. And now? Now I'm selfish enough to keep you anyway. The kiss was different from the desperate one in his office. This was slower, deliberate, a promise rather than a claiming. I tasted wine on his lips, felt the restrained strength in the way his fingers tangled in my damp hair. When he pulled back, we were both breathing harder. The debt, Sebastian said, his forehead resting against mine. Your mother's medical bills, the student loans, the credit cards, all of it. I'll take care of it. I stiffened. I don't want to be bought. You're not being bought. You're being freed. There's a difference. He pulled back enough to meet my eyes. I have more money than I could spend in 10 lifetimes, Sarah. Letting you struggle under debt that's crushing you while I have the resources to eliminate it in a phone call, that's not honor. That's cruelty. And in exchange? His expression hardened slightly. No exchange. No conditions. Whether you stay with me or not, whether we work out or fall apart, the debt is gone. That's not negotiable. I wanted to argue, wanted to maintain my independence and pride, but the thought of being free from the constant anxiety, the late-night calculations of which bill to pay and which to let slide, the fear of losing everything to one unexpected emergency, it was seductive beyond measure. Why? I whispered. Why me? You could have anyone. Women who understand your world, who come from your background. Why the waitress with crushing debt and a dangerous journal? Sebastian smiled, and it transformed his face into something almost boyish. Because you never wanted anything from me except to be left alone. Because you treated me like a person instead of a walking bank account or a stepping stone to power. Because you wrote a journal full of observations that saw past the reputation to the man underneath. He brushed his thumb across my lower lip. And because when I read your confession, when I saw that you loved me despite knowing what I am, I realized I'd been in love with you for longer than I wanted to admit. That's a lot of becauses. I'm a complicated man with complicated reasons for the things I do. He stepped back, giving me space. But here's the simple truth, Sarah. I want you in my life, in my home, in my bed. Not as an obligation or a transaction, but as a partner. Someone who sees all of me, and chooses to stay anyway. My heart hammered against my ribs. This was the moment. The choice that would define everything that came after. I could walk away, take his offer to clear my debt, and start fresh somewhere far from his dangerous world. Or I could stay, accepting all the complications and dangers that came with loving a man like Sebastian Dante. I thought about the journal entries I'd written over 3 years, about the man I'd documented with careful observation and growing affection, about the way he'd protected me tonight, the way he'd killed for me without hesitation, about his grandmother's cross and his ability to cook pasta and the careful way he'd read every word I'd written. I'll stay, I said, making my choice. But Sebastian, I need you to understand something. I'm not built for this world. I don't know how to navigate the politics or the violence or the constant danger. I'm going to make mistakes. I'm going to question things you consider normal. I'm going to push back when I think you're wrong. Good, he said simply. I don't want a yes woman, Sarah. I want you. All your questions and complications and moral stands. That's the whole point. Relief washed through me, followed quickly by a new anxiety. What happens tomorrow? When reality sets in, and I'm living in a penthouse with a man I barely know beyond what I've observed from a distance? Sebastian's smile was knowing. Tomorrow, you'll wake up in a guest room, unless you choose my bed instead, and we'll have coffee while I show you how to access your new accounts. Then we'll go shopping, because everything you own is in an apartment you're not going back to. And somewhere in there, we'll have the conversation about boundaries and expectations and what this relationship actually looks like in practice. That's very organized for a man who just committed multiple murders. I've been planning this conversation for 6 months. I just didn't expect it to happen under these circumstances. He moved back to the kitchen, pulling out a bottle of wine. But since we're here, we might as well start now. Tell me about the journal. When did you start writing about me specifically? I accepted the glass of wine he poured, taking a fortifying sip. The second week I worked at the club. You came in early before the staff arrived. I was in the office, dropping off paperwork. You were on the phone, speaking Italian. I couldn't understand the words, but I understood the tone. You were comforting someone, speaking gently. It didn't match the reputation, and I couldn't reconcile the two versions of you. My sister, Sebastian said softly. Her husband had just left her. She was devastated. I know. I figured it out eventually, through other observations. But that first glimpse of you being human instead of mythical, it fascinated me. So I started writing down what I noticed. Small things at first. The way you remembered every employee's name. How you tipped generously but never made a show of it. The pattern of which deals you'd take and which you'd refuse. You noticed that? You'd refuse anything involving trafficking. Drugs were business, gambling was tradition, but the moment someone brought up moving people against their will, you'd shut them down. Cold, final, no negotiation. I met his eyes. That's when I started falling for you. When I realized you had lines you wouldn't cross, even when crossing them would be profitable. Sebastian's expression was unreadable. I've crossed plenty of lines, Sarah. Don't make me into a hero. I'm not. I'm making you into a man. A complicated, dangerous, occasionally violent man who also has a code, who protects his people, who loves his family enough to comfort his sister in Italian while running an empire. I took another sip of wine, feeling bold. The journal isn't a list of your virtues. It's documentation of your contradictions. That's what made me fall in love with you. Not despite the darkness, but because of how you navigate it. The silence that followed was heavy with unspoken emotion. Sebastian moved closer, taking the wine glass from my hand and setting it aside. His fingers traced the collar of his shirt that I wore, the gesture possessive but tender. I'm going to disappoint you, he said quietly. There will be nights when I come home covered in blood. Decisions I make that you'll question. Things I do that push your moral boundaries beyond comfort. I need you to know that before we go any further. I know. I've been watching you for 3 years, remember? I know what you are. I placed my hand over his, holding it against my collarbone. But I also know you gave me a choice tonight. You could have used me, manipulated me, forced me to testify or provide information. Instead, you protected me, killed for me, then asked rather than demanded. That doesn't make me a good man, Sarah. No, it makes you my man. There's a difference. His kiss this time was fierce, claiming, full of 3 years of restraint finally breaking. I kissed him back with equal intensity, my fingers tangling in his hair as he lifted me onto the counter. The wine glasses crashed to the floor, forgotten, as his hands slid under the shirt I wore, warm against my skin. Sebastian, I breathed against his lips. I need to know. Are we doing this? Really doing this? He pulled back enough to meet my eyes, his expression serious despite the desire darkening his gaze. I've wanted you since the first time I saw you drop a tray and apologize to empty air before anyone even noticed. I've watched you work yourself to exhaustion for 3 years, while I tried to convince myself you were better off without my attention. Tonight I almost lost you. So yes, Sarah Mitchell, we're really doing this. Then take me to bed. Not the guest room. Your bed. Something hot and possessive flashed in his eyes. He lifted me from the counter with easy strength, my legs wrapping around his waist as he carried me through the penthouse. His bedroom was as surprisingly lived in as the rest of the space. A massive bed with rumpled sheets, more bookshelves, framed photographs of people I assumed were family. He set me down gently, his hands moving to the buttons of the shirt I wore. Tell me if you want me to stop. Anytime, any reason. I need to hear you say you understand that. I understand, but Sebastian, I'm not going to ask you to stop. The shirt fell away, followed by the borrowed sweatpants. His hands were reverent as they mapped my body, learning every curve and hollow with patient attention. When he finally joined me on the bed, skin against skin, I felt the last of my carefully maintained distance crumble. This was real. He was real. The dangerous, complicated man I'd documented for 3 years was mine, and I was his, and tomorrow would bring new challenges and dangers. But tonight, in his bed with his hands on my skin and his breath in my ear, I let myself believe in the possibility of happiness. Later, as I lay in his arms with my head on his chest, listening to the steady rhythm of his heartbeat, Sebastian spoke into the darkness. The journal. Do you still want to keep writing in it? I thought about the worn leather cover, about 3 years of observations and confessions. I don't know. It nearly got me killed. But it also brought us together, gave me insight into how you see the world, how you see me. His fingers traced idle patterns on my shoulder. I'd like you to keep writing. Not observations about my business. That's too dangerous now that people know what you notice. But about us. About this. I want to read how you process what we're building together. That's very trusting for a man who controls everything. With you, I don't want control. I want honesty. The kind of raw truth you write when you think no one's reading. He pressed a kiss to my hair. Besides, if I'm disappointing or being an ass, I'd rather read about it in your journal than have you silently resent me. I laughed, the sound surprising me with its normalness. Fair point, though I reserve the right to be honest about when you're being overprotective or controlling. I'm going to be both of those things frequently. It's who I am. I know. I documented it thoroughly. I tilted my head to look up at him. Sebastian, thank you for protecting me tonight, for reading my journal and not mocking me for it, for giving me a choice when you could have simply taken what you wanted. His arms tightened around me. Thank you for staying, for seeing past the monster to whatever's underneath, for writing a journal that showed me I wasn't alone in this feeling. As I drifted toward sleep, safe in the arms of a dangerous man who'd killed to protect me, I thought about tomorrow, about the debt that would disappear, the life that would change, the journal entries I'd write about this new reality. But mostly, I thought about the last line I'd written before Sebastian returned from his war with Vincent. I love him. And if that's the truth that destroys me, at least it's my truth. Turned out, that truth hadn't destroyed me at all. It had saved me. Morning arrived with sunlight streaming through floor-to-ceiling windows I'd been too distracted to notice the night before. I woke slowly, disoriented by the unfamiliar weight of expensive sheets and the warm body beside me. For a moment, I thought I was dreaming. Then the events of the previous night came rushing back with startling clarity. Vincent's betrayal. Julia's gun pointed at my chest. Sebastian's hands covered in blood. The choice I'd made to stay. I turned my head carefully, not wanting to wake him. Sebastian slept on his stomach. One arm stretched across the space where I'd been. His face relaxed in a way I'd never seen while he was conscious. There was a scar along his shoulder blade that I hadn't noticed in the darkness. Old, well-healed. The kind that spoke of violence survived. I wanted to trace it with my fingers. To catalog this new intimacy the way I'd cataloged everything else about him in my journal. The journal. I'd left it in the bathroom last night, forgotten in the aftermath of Sebastian's confession and the gravity of my decision. The thought of leaving it unattended sent a spike of anxiety through me. Irrational though it was. We were in Sebastian's penthouse. No one could access it without his permission. But 3 years of paranoia weren't easily dismissed. I slipped from the bed as quietly as possible, pulling on the discarded shirt from the night before. Sebastian didn't stir, his breathing deep and even. I padded across the bedroom, my bare feet silent on the hardwood floor, and made my way back to the bathroom. The journal sat exactly where I'd left it on the marble counter, looking innocuous despite the chaos it had caused. I picked it up, running my fingers over the worn leather cover. How many entries had I written? How many observations and confessions had I poured onto these pages, thinking they were private thoughts that would never see another person's eyes? I flipped it open to a random page, dated about 6 months ago. Sebastian fired one of his managers today. Mikhail, the one who ran the East Side operations. I overheard the conversation through the office door while I was cleaning the hallway. Mikhail had been skimming, taking a percentage off the top and thinking no one would notice. Sebastian's voice never rose above conversational volume, but there was something in his tone that made my skin crawl. "You stole from family," he said. "That's unforgivable." I didn't see Mikhail leave. I don't think anyone did. I remembered writing that entry, remembered the cold fear that had settled in my stomach as I'd processed what I'd overheard. remembered wondering if Mikhail had simply been fired or if something more permanent had been his fate. Finding anything interesting? I jumped, nearly dropping the journal. Sebastian stood in the doorway, wearing nothing but black boxer briefs, his hair disheveled from sleep. Even relaxed and half-dressed, he radiated the kind of presence that made it impossible to forget what he was capable of. "Sorry," I said, clutching the journal to my chest. "I didn't mean to wake you. I just needed to check on your journal," he finished, moving closer. "I understand. After last night, it's probably the one thing that feels familiar." His fingers brushed mine where they gripped the leather cover. "What were you reading?" I hesitated, then showed him the entry about Mikhail. "Did you kill him?" Sebastian's expression didn't change. "Do you want the truth or the comfortable lie?" "Always the truth, even when it's ugly." "Then yes. Mikhail stole from me, endangered my operations through his greed, and put other people at risk with his carelessness. He was given a chance to make it right, refused, and faced the consequences." He met my eyes steadily. "Does that change how you feel about last night? About your decision to stay?" I thought about it honestly, examining my reaction. Horror? Yes, some. Fear? Definitely. But also a strange sense of understanding. In Sebastian's world, betrayal had consequences. Theft from family, and he'd called his organization family, wasn't a matter for police or courts. It was handled internally, finally. "No," I said slowly, "it doesn't change anything. I knew what you were when I fell in love with you. The journal documents it all. The violence, the ruthlessness, the way you eliminate problems permanently. I can't claim ignorance now." Something softened in his expression. Most people lie to themselves. Tell themselves their partner will change, or that they didn't really see what they saw. You don't do that. I've been lying to myself for 3 years about whether you'd ever notice me. I'm done with lies, even comfortable ones. I set the journal back on the counter. "But Sebastian, I need to understand the rules. Your world has codes I don't know. Lines I might cross without realizing it. If I'm going to be part of your life, I need to know how not to get myself or anyone else killed." He nodded, respect evident in his gaze. "Fair enough. Come on. Let's have coffee and I'll give you the primer on surviving in my world." 20 minutes later, we sat at his kitchen island with espresso in tiny cups that probably cost more than my entire dish collection. I'd pulled on the sweatpants from the night before, and Sebastian had added a t-shirt to his boxer briefs. The domesticity of the scene was surreal, drinking morning coffee with a man who'd killed people less than 12 hours ago. "Rule 1, Sebastian began, his tone serious despite the casual setting. "Never repeat anything you hear in my presence. Conversations, names, deals, locations, all of it stays confidential. The moment you share information, even innocently, you become a liability." I thought about my journal, full of overheard conversations and documented observations. I've already broken that rule. Everything I wrote was for yourself, in a private journal you never intended anyone to read. That's different from gossip or deliberate disclosure. He sipped his espresso. "But going forward, no more documenting business details. Your observations about me personally, about us, that's fine. But names, operations, deals, those stay out of the journal." "Understood. What's rule 2? Never go anywhere without security. I know it feels excessive, but Sarah, Vincent wasn't the only person who might want leverage against me. You're a vulnerability now, a known association. That makes you a target." The weight of what he was saying settled over me. So I'll always have bodyguards following me? Watching me? For a while, yes. Eventually people will understand that touching you means war, and the surveillance can be less obvious. but initially you'll have a security detail anytime you leave this building." His expression was apologetic, but firm. "I won't compromise on this." I nodded, swallowing the instinctive protest. I'd known choosing Sebastian meant choosing his world, with all its restrictions and dangers. Rule 3? Trust your instincts. If something feels wrong, it probably is. If someone makes you uncomfortable, tell me immediately. If you sense danger, get to safety first and ask questions later. He reached across the counter, taking my hand. "You have good instincts, Sarah. The journal proves it. You noticed patterns others missed, sensed danger before it materialized. Don't second-guess that ability just because you're in a new situation. What about with you? What if my instincts tell me you're being overprotective or controlling?" A small smile curved his lips. "Then you tell me, we argue about it, and we find a compromise." I said I don't want a yes woman, and I meant it. But understand that some things aren't negotiable. Your safety, for instance. On that subject, I will always err on the side of excessive caution. We spent the next hour going over more guidelines. How to identify who in Sebastian's organization could be trusted. What to do if we were separated during an emergency. How to communicate in public when discussing sensitive matters. The protocols felt overwhelming, but I forced myself to absorb every detail. "Now," Sebastian said, refilling our coffee cups. "Let's talk about the practical matters. Your apartment. I'm having your personal belongings moved here this week. Anything you want to keep, my people will bring. The rest can be donated or disposed of." "Just like that? I don't get to pack my own things?" "You could, but it would require security accompanying you, and I'd prefer not to broadcast where you live to anyone watching. Safer to have a team handle it discreetly." He pulled out his phone, showing me a banking app. "Your accounts. I've transferred enough to cover 6 months of living expenses, though you won't need it since you're staying here. Consider it security, just in case." I looked at the number on the screen and felt my stomach drop. It was more than I'd made in 2 years of working double shifts. "Sebastian, this is too much." "It's insurance. If something happens to me, if you decide you need to leave, if any emergency requires immediate funds, you have them. No arguments." His tone left no room for negotiation. "The debt?" I asked quietly, almost afraid of the answer. "Handled as of 6 this morning. Medical bills, student loans, credit cards, all paid in full. You'll receive confirmation from each creditor within 48 hours. He said it so casually, as if erasing crushing debt was no more complicated than ordering breakfast. Tears burned behind my eyes. 3 years of suffocating anxiety, of choosing between food and electricity, of lying awake, calculating which bill could be delayed another month. Gone. Just like that. I don't know what to say. You don't have to say anything. Just promise me you'll stop running yourself into the ground trying to survive. You're safe now, Sarah. Financially, physically, in every way that matters. Let yourself believe that. I wanted to believe it, desperately. But years of precarious existence had taught me that safety was temporary, that disaster could strike without warning. What if this doesn't work out? What if we realize we're incompatible and I need to leave? Then you leave with enough money to start fresh and my protection to ensure no one bothers you. The debt stays paid regardless. What we build together isn't contingent on financial obligation. He moved around the counter, tilting my chin up to meet his eyes. I need you to understand this, Sarah. You're not here because you owe me. You're here because I want you here. And because you chose to stay. Those are the only reasons that matter. The kiss was gentle, reassuring, so different from the passion of the night before. When he pulled back, I was crying in earnest, overwhelmed by the sudden shift in my circumstances. Sorry, I said, wiping at my eyes. I'm not usually this emotional. It's just a lot to process. You witnessed murders, had a gun pointed at you, and had your entire life upended in the span of 12 hours. You're entitled to some tears. He handed me a napkin. But Sarah, I need you to start thinking differently, not as a waitress living paycheck to paycheck, but as someone who belongs in my world. That means no more apologizing for taking up space or having needs. Understood? I nodded, dabbing at my eyes. I'll try. Good. Now, let's discuss today's agenda. We need to get you proper clothes, everything in your size, suitable for various occasions. You'll need a phone that isn't easily tracked. And we should probably discuss what you want to do for work, since waitressing is no longer an option. That pulled me up short. Work? I assumed you'd want me to just... I don't know. Be available when you need me? Sebastian's expression hardened. I told you, I don't want a possession. I want a partner. If you want to work, we'll find something suitable. If you'd rather pursue education, we can arrange that. Whatever you want to do with your time, we'll make it happen. But you're not going to sit in this penthouse waiting for me like some kind of decorative object. The vehemence in his voice surprised me. You've really thought about this. I've had 6 months to think about what I'd do if I ever had the chance to make you mine. Every scenario. Every possibility. He ran a hand through his hair, a rare gesture of uncertainty. I know I'm controlling Sarah. It's part of who I am. But I don't want to control you into becoming someone you're not. I fell in love with the woman who wrote that journal. Observant, intelligent, determined. I want to support her, not diminish her. I stood, moving around the counter to stand in front of him. I want to go back to school, finish my nursing degree. I had to drop out when Mom got sick, and I've always regretted not completing it. Then that's what you'll do. I'll make some calls, find out which programs are currently accepting applications. Sebastian, I interrupted gently. I can research programs myself. I don't need you to arrange everything. He looked like he wanted to argue, then visibly restrained himself. Right, of course. You're capable of handling your own education planning. I smiled, recognizing how difficult it was for him to relinquish control. But maybe you could help me figure out which schools have the best security, since I'll need protection while attending classes? Relief crossed his features. That I can definitely help with. We spent the rest of the morning in strange domesticity, discussing degree programs while eating breakfast, planning my wardrobe needs while Sebastian fielded phone calls about the Velvet Crown cleanup. It felt surreal, this blending of normal life concerns with the underlying violence of his world. Around noon, Sebastian's phone rang with a call that made his expression darken. He stepped away to take it, his voice dropping to the controlled tone I recognized as dangerous. When he returned, his jaw was tight. We have a problem. One of Vincent's allies, Marcus Volkov, survived last night. He's gone to ground, but he's making noise about revenge. Claims you witnessed something that could implicate me in crimes beyond Vincent's murder. My blood ran cold. The journal. He must know about the other observations I documented. Probably. Which means we need to make a decision. Sebastian's eyes were serious. We can wait for him to make a move. Or we can be proactive. Find him first. Eliminate the threat permanently. You mean kill him. I mean protect us. Volkov won't stop Sarah. Men like him see mercy as weakness. If we don't act, he'll keep coming until he either succeeds or dies trying. I thought about the journal entries documenting various crimes I'd witnessed, about how much damage that information could do in the wrong hands, about the life I'd chosen when I decided to stay with Sebastian. Then we find him first, I said, my voice steadier than I felt. But Sebastian, I want to be involved, not just protected and kept in the dark. If I'm going to be part of your world, I need to understand how it works. He studied me for a long moment. "You're sure? This won't be clean or pretty. Finding Volkov means interrogating people who won't want to talk. It means violence." "I'm sure. I can't hide behind security and pretend not to know what's happening. That's not who I am." Something like pride flashed in Sebastian's eyes. "All right. But we do this my way, with proper precautions. And if at any point it becomes too much, you tell me immediately. Deal?" "Deal." As Sebastian made calls to mobilize his people, I retrieved my journal from the bathroom. I turned to a fresh page and began to write. Day 1 of my new life. I woke up in Sebastian Dante's bed, had coffee while discussing rules for surviving in the criminal underworld, and agreed to help hunt down a man who wants us both dead. This should terrify me more than it does. But I've spent 3 years observing Sebastian's world from the outside. Now I'm on the inside, and everything I documented is about to become my reality. The violence, the loyalty, the codes that govern this shadow empire. I'm not just writing about it anymore. I'm living it. Sebastian asked if I was sure about getting involved. The truth is, I'm not sure about anything except that I love him, and I'm not going to hide while he fights battles that are partly my fault. If my observations put us in danger, then my observations can help get us out of it. Marcus Volkov wants revenge. He wants to use my journal against Sebastian. But he's forgotten something important. I've been documenting patterns and behaviors for 3 years. I know how these men think, how they operate, where they hide. It's time to put all those observations to use. I closed the journal as Sebastian returned, his expression grim but determined. My people are checking Volkov's known locations. We should have a lead within the hour. He noticed the journal in my hands. Writing about our morning? Writing about what comes next. I met his eyes steadily. Sebastian, in my observations about Volkov, I documented that he has a sister, Elena. She works at a hospital on the east side, administrative position. He's protective of her, mentioned her in conversations I overheard. If he's gone to ground, he might try to contact her. Sebastian's expression shifted to something calculating. You remember details like that from random observations? I remember everything. It's why the journal got so dangerous. I documented more than I realized. I flipped back through pages, finding the entry about Volkov. Here. 6 months ago, he was talking to another associate about his sister's promotion. Said she was the only family he had left, that he'd do anything to protect her. Then that's our leverage. Sebastian pulled out his phone. I'll have someone watching the sister. If Volkov contacts her, we'll know. As he made the call, I realized something. This was my role now, not just Sebastian's partner, but an active participant in his world. My observations, the details I'd compulsively documented for 3 years, weren't just private confessions anymore. They were intelligence, assets, tools for survival. I'd spent 3 years writing about Sebastian Dante's empire from a safe distance. Now I was helping build it, protect it, fight for it. The journal that had nearly gotten me killed might be the very thing that kept us both alive. The irony wasn't lost on me, and as Sebastian returned, pulling me close with satisfaction evident in his eyes, I realized I wouldn't have it any other way. This was my life now. Complicated, dangerous, built on a foundation of violence and loyalty in equal measure. But it was real, and it was mine, and I'd chosen it with my eyes wide open. No more observing from the sidelines, no more careful distance. I was in Sebastian's world completely now, and together, we'd face whatever came next, even if that meant hunting down a man who wanted us dead. The surveillance photo arrived 3 hours later, grainy but clear enough to confirm what we'd suspected. Marcus Volkov, captured by one of Sebastian's people outside the hospital where his sister worked. He'd been careful, Different clothes than the night before, a baseball cap pulled low, approaching from a service entrance that avoided main security cameras, but not careful enough. "He's scared," Sebastian said, studying the image on his tablet. "Look at his body language. Hunched shoulders, constantly checking over his shoulder. He knows we're hunting him." I leaned closer, examining the photo with the same attention to detail I'd applied to 3 years of observations. "He's carrying something. See? The way his jacket hangs on the right side. There's weight in that pocket." Sebastian zoomed in, his expression hardening. "Gun, probably the same one he had last night when Vincent's coup fell apart." He glanced at me with something like approval. "Good eye." The praise sent an unexpected warmth through me. I'd spent so long being invisible, my observations dismissed or ignored, that having Sebastian value my input felt like validation I hadn't known I needed. "What's the plan?" I asked, watching as he forwarded the photo to several contacts. "We wait for him to leave the hospital, then we follow. He'll lead us to wherever he's hiding, and we'll end this." Sebastian's tone was matter-of-fact, discussing murder with the same casual efficiency he'd used to discuss breakfast. "The question is whether you want to be there when it happens." I thought about what he was really asking. Did I want to witness him kill someone? See firsthand the violence I'd only read about in news reports and overheard in whispered conversations? "I want to be there," I said, surprising myself with the certainty in my voice. "Not because I want to watch someone die, but because I need to understand fully what your world looks like. If I'm going to be part of this, I can't pick and choose which parts I acknowledge." Sebastian studied me for a long moment, searching for doubt or fear. Whatever he saw must have satisfied him, because he nodded. "All right, but we do this smart. You stay in the car with Dmitri while I handle Volkov. You can see everything, but you're protected, non-negotiable." Agreed. I paused, then asked the question that had been nagging at me since we'd identified Volkov's location. His sister, Elena. What happens to her? She's innocent in all this. She stays innocent. We're not in the business of hurting civilians who haven't chosen this life. Sebastian's voice was firm. Elena will never know we used her to find her brother. As far as she's concerned, Marcus disappeared because he made enemies in the wrong circles. The relief I felt was disproportionate to the situation. We were planning a murder, but at least we weren't planning to harm an uninvolved woman. The moral gymnastics required to find comfort in that distinction should have disturbed me more than it did. "You're thinking too hard," Sebastian observed, pulling me from my thoughts. "I can see it in your expression, the internal debate about right and wrong, about who you're becoming. Can you blame me? 24 hours ago, I was a waitress worried about rent. Now I'm helping plan to kill someone." He moved closer, his hands framing my face with unexpected gentleness. "You're not helping plan to kill someone. I'm killing someone who threatened you, who wants to destroy everything I've built, who would have used your journal to put you in danger. There's a difference between being complicit and being protected." Is there? Because from where I'm standing, I'm making choices that enable the violence. I could have refused to share the information about his sister, could have asked you to find another way. "You could have," Sebastian agreed. "But you didn't, because you understand reality better than you want to admit. Volkov won't stop. Men like him view mercy as weakness and opportunity. The only way to ensure our safety is to eliminate the threat permanently." I knew he was right, had documented enough of his world in my journal to understand the brutal logic that governed it. But knowing intellectually and accepting emotionally were different things. "I'm not going to pretend this is easy for me," I said quietly. "I'm not built for this world, Sebastian. But I'm trying to adapt, because the alternative is walking away from you, and I don't want to do that." His kiss was soft, understanding. "I know. and I won't lie and say it gets easier. But you'll learn to compartmentalize, to separate the violence necessary for survival from who you are as a person. It's the only way to stay sane in this life. Before I could respond, his phone buzzed. He glanced at it, his expression sharpening. Volkov's leaving the hospital. We need to move. The transition was jarring, from intimate conversation to operational efficiency in seconds. Sebastian made 3 quick phone calls while I grabbed my jacket, coordinating his people with the practiced ease of someone who'd done this countless times before. By the time we reached his car, a sleek black sedan with bulletproof windows, 2 other vehicles were already in position. Dimitri will drive, Sebastian explained, sliding into the back seat beside me. Antonio and his team are in the car behind us. Marco's team is parallel, boxing Volkov in from multiple directions. He won't know he's being followed until it's too late. I watched the city pass by as we merged into traffic, tailing the SUV that contained Volkov at a careful distance. My heart hammered against my ribs, adrenaline making my hands shake despite my attempt at composure. Sebastian noticed, covering my trembling hands with his steady ones. You can change your mind. I can have Dimitri take you back to the penthouse. No, I need to see this. I needed to understand what I'd signed up for, what loving Sebastian Dante really meant beyond the romance of dangerous attraction and passionate confessions. We drove for 20 minutes, heading toward the industrial district, where abandoned warehouses and forgotten factories created a maze of shadows perfect for hiding. Volkov's SUV finally pulled into a shipping yard, parking behind a rusted container that provided cover from the street. He's meeting someone, Sebastian observed, watching through binoculars as a second figure emerged from the shadows. Alexei Kozlov, one of the Russian syndicate's enforcers. Volkov's calling in favors, trying to build protection against me. What does that mean? It means he's more dangerous than I thought. If the Russians are willing to provide support, this isn't just about revenge. It's about opportunity. They see a chance to move against my territory while I'm distracted. Sebastian's voice was cold, calculated. We need to send a message, not just to Volkov, but to anyone considering a similar move. He pulled out his phone, texting rapid instructions. I watched the exchange through the tinted windows, saw Alexei hand Volkov something. Money, probably, or weapons. Saw them talk with the intensity of men planning violence. When do we... I started to ask, but the question died as Sebastian's people moved with choreographed precision. It happened faster than I could process. Antonio's team appeared from one direction, Marco's from another, boxing in both Volkov and Alexei with military efficiency. There was shouting, the flash of weapons being drawn, then gunfire that made me flinch despite the bulletproof barriers between us and the violence. Sebastian remained calm beside me, watching the scene unfold with detached assessment. Alexei's going for his car. He'll make it. We're letting him. He needs to report back what happened here. You planned this, I realized. Not just to kill Volkov, but to send a message to the Russians. Always think 3 moves ahead, Sarah. Volkov's death solves our immediate problem, but it creates a vacuum. Better to fill that vacuum with fear and respect than leave it open for interpretation. The gunfire stopped. I watched as Sebastian's people dragged Volkov behind the container, out of sight from the street. Alexei's car peeled away, tires screaming against pavement, clearly deciding that whatever alliance he'd formed with Volkov wasn't worth dying for. Stay here, Sebastian instructed, already reaching for the door handle. This won't take long. I grabbed his arm before he could exit. Be careful. His smile was predatory. I'm always careful. Then he was gone, moving toward the container with the same fluid grace I'd observed for 3 years, without truly understanding what it meant. Dimitri remained in the driver's seat, silent and watchful. I could see his eyes constantly scanning our surroundings, checking mirrors, assessing threats with the practiced vigilance of a man who'd kept Sebastian alive through countless dangerous situations. "How long have you worked for him?" I asked, needing to fill the silence while Sebastian was out of sight. 12 years, Dmitri replied, his Russian accent thick. "Since we were both much younger and stupider. He saved my life. I've been returning the favor ever since." "Do you ever question what you do? The violence? The moral compromises?" Dmitri's eyes met mine in the rearview mirror. "Every day. But I question what I'd become without Sebastian more. He gave me purpose, family, a code to live by. The violence is necessary to protect that. Would I prefer a peaceful life? Maybe. But this is the life I chose, and I make peace with it by ensuring the violence serves a purpose beyond cruelty." His words echoed what Sebastian had said about compartmentalization, about finding ways to live with the darkness by maintaining clear boundaries about why and when it was deployed. Movement caught my eye. Sebastian emerging from behind the container, wiping his hands on a cloth that one of his men provided. His expression was neutral, giving nothing away, but there was blood on his shirt that hadn't been there before. He slid back into the car, tossing the cloth aside. "It's done. Volkov won't be a problem anymore." I wanted to ask what had happened. Wanted details, confirmation, something to make this real beyond the abstract knowledge that Sebastian had just killed someone. But the words stuck in my throat. "Alexei will report to his bosses that touching anything of mine comes with immediate consequences," Sebastian continued, pulling out his phone to send more instructions. "The Russians will reconsider any plans they had for expansion into my territory, and everyone else will think twice before assuming Vincent's failed coup created an opportunity." The casual efficiency with which he discussed murder and intimidation should have horrified me. Instead, I found myself analyzing it with the same detachment I'd applied to 3 years of journal entries. This was Sebastian's world. This was how he maintained power, how he protected what was his, how he protected me. "You're quiet," he observed as Dmitri pulled out of the shipping yard. "Talk to me, Sarah." "I'm processing. Give me a minute." He didn't push, just took my hand and held it while we drove back toward his penthouse. The silence between us was heavy with unspoken thoughts, mine about what I'd just witnessed, his probably about whether I'd change my mind about staying. By the time we reached the building, I'd made my decision. "I need to write about this," I said as we rode the elevator up, "in my journal. I need to process what just happened in the only way I know how." Sebastian nodded, understanding in his eyes. "Of course. Take all the time you need." In his bedroom, I retrieved the journal from where I'd left it that morning and settled into the leather chair by the window. Sebastian disappeared into the bathroom to shower, giving me space to work through my thoughts. I opened to a fresh page and began to write. I just watched Sebastian Dante orchestrate a murder, didn't see the actual killing. He made sure I was protected, kept at a safe distance. But I watched the setup. Watched his people move with practiced precision. Watched a man I've loved from a distance for 3 years become the dangerous criminal I've always known him to be. I should be horrified. Should be questioning every decision that led me here. Instead, I'm analyzing what I witnessed with the same clinical detachment I've applied to 3 years of observations. The efficiency of the operation. The strategic thinking that turned a simple assassination into a message to potential enemies. The way Sebastian balanced necessary violence with protection of innocence. Volkov's sister will never know her brother died because of information I provided. Is this who I'm becoming? Someone who can watch a man be hunted down and feel nothing beyond intellectual curiosity about the execution? Someone who finds comfort in the efficiency of violence as long as it's deployed for protective purposes? Or am I just finally accepting reality? I've been documenting this world for 3 years, without truly acknowledging what those observations meant. The blood beneath the business deals, the bodies behind the power plays, the violence that maintains the fragile peace in Sebastian's empire. I knew what he was when I fell in love with him. Knew it, and loved him anyway. Today was just the first time I couldn't hide behind comfortable distance. Couldn't pretend the observations in my journal were about someone else's life. This is my life now. Our life. Built on foundations that would crumble under conventional morality, but hold steady according to the codes that govern Sebastian's world. I'm not sure what that makes me. Complicit? Compromised? Changed beyond recognition from the waitress who started this journal 3 years ago? Maybe all of those things. Maybe none of them. Maybe I'm just a woman learning to navigate a dangerous world alongside the man she loves, making peace with necessary violence while maintaining her own boundaries about what she'll accept. Marcus Volkov is dead. I helped make that happen by providing information about his sister, and I'm not going to pretend I feel guilty about it because he would have killed us both given the chance. That's the brutal mathematics of this world. Eliminate threats before they eliminate you. I understand it now. Not just intellectually, but viscerally. This is what choosing Sebastian means. This is the price of safety in his world. And I'm willing to pay it. I closed the journal as Sebastian emerged from the bathroom, dressed in fresh clothes with his wet hair slicked back. He looked younger somehow. The violence of the afternoon washed away to reveal the man underneath. "How are you feeling?" he asked, moving to sit on the arm of my chair. Like I just crossed a line I can't uncross. I met his eyes. But I'm okay with that. I think. His hand cupped my face, thumb brushing my cheekbone. "You're sure? Because Sarah, there's no shame in admitting this is too much. I can arrange protection for you that doesn't require you being directly involved in the violence." "I'm sure. I need to understand this world completely if I'm going to survive in it. Selective ignorance would just make me vulnerable." I leaned into his touch. "Besides, you were right earlier. I've been documenting this for 3 years. I knew what it all meant, even if I didn't want to acknowledge it. You're stronger than you think. Or more damaged than I want to admit," I said with a humorless laugh. Functional people probably don't react to witnessing a murder by analyzing the operational efficiency. Functional people don't survive in my world. You need a certain flexibility of morality, a willingness to compartmentalize. His expression grew serious. "But Sarah, I need you to promise me something. If it ever becomes too much, if you can't reconcile the violence with who you are, you'll tell me. Not run, not hide. Tell me. We'll figure something out. I promise." I pulled him down for a kiss, needing the connection to ground myself in the reality of us, rather than the violence that surrounded us. "But Sebastian, I'm not going anywhere. Today was difficult, but it didn't change how I feel about you. If anything, it just made everything more real." "More real," he repeated, something like relief in his voice. "I can work with real." We spent the rest of the evening in careful normalcy, ordering dinner, watching mindless television, deliberately not discussing the afternoon's events. But as we settled into bed that night, Sebastian pulled me close with an intensity that spoke of fear finally released. "I thought I'd lose you today," he admitted into the darkness. "Thought you'd see that side of me and realize you couldn't live with it. You forget that I've been seeing that side of you for 3 years. I just wasn't close enough to smell the blood before." I traced patterns on his chest, feeling his heartbeat steady beneath my palm. "I'm not naive enough to think there won't be more difficult days, more violence, more moral compromises. But I'm choosing this, Sebastian. Choosing you. All of you." His arms tightened around me. "I don't deserve you. Probably not. But you've got me anyway." As I drifted toward sleep, safe in the arms of a man who'd killed to protect me, I thought about the journal entry I'd written, about the woman I was becoming, shaped by violence and loyalty in equal measure. I wasn't the same person who'd started documenting observations 3 years ago. That woman had been naive, hopeful, searching for meaning in a world that seemed determined to crush her. This woman understood darkness, accepted necessary violence, made peace with complicated morality. But at the core, I was still me. Still the woman who noticed details others missed, who documented truth even when it was uncomfortable, who chose honesty over easy lies. And now I was the woman who loved Sebastian Dante, completely and without reservation. Whatever that made me, whatever compromises it required, I'd accepted it fully. The diary I shouldn't have left behind had brought me here, to this bed, this man, this dangerous life, and I wouldn't change a thing. 3 months passed in a strange blend of domesticity and danger. I enrolled in an accelerated nursing program at the university, accompanied daily by Antonio, who posed as a graduate student but was unmistakably Sebastian's security. My classmates probably wondered why someone auditing literature courses needed such an imposing study partner, but no one asked questions I'd have struggled to answer. The journal entries during those months documented a transformation I was still trying to understand. Notes about anatomy lectures sat alongside observations about the hierarchy in Sebastian's organization. Study schedules shared pages with documentation of the quiet ways Sebastian showed affection. Coffee prepared exactly how I liked it. Textbooks that appeared on my desk before I knew I needed them. His hand finding mine during rare, quiet evenings when violence didn't demand his attention. I was learning to navigate 2 worlds simultaneously. During the day, I was Sarah Mitchell, nursing student, blending in with other students who worried about exams and clinical rotations. At night, I was Sebastian Dante's partner, learning the unspoken codes that governed his empire, understanding which conversations to ignore and which details mattered. The journal had become something different than it started. Less observation from a distance, more documentation of active participation. I wrote about attending a meeting where Sebastian negotiated territory with rival organizations, my presence beside him a statement of claim and partnership. About the night one of his lieutenants was killed, and I held Sebastian while he processed the loss of someone he'd considered family. About gradually understanding that loyalty in his world was currency more valuable than money. "You're writing again," Sebastian observed, entering his office where I'd claimed the leather chair by the window as my preferred thinking spot. "Good session or bad?" I glanced up from the page, taking in his appearance. 3 a.m, shirt partially unbuttoned, exhaustion evident in the shadows under his eyes. He'd been handling a situation downtown, something about a shipment and complications I'd learned not to ask about unless he volunteered information. "Reflective," I replied, setting down my pen. "Come here." He moved to me without hesitation, letting me guide him to sit on the ottoman while I remained in the chair. My hands went to his shoulders, working at the knots of tension I could feel beneath expensive fabric. "Mikhail's nephew tried to retaliate tonight," Sebastian said after a moment, referring to the man he'd eliminated months before I'd even arrived in his life. "Kid couldn't have been more than 19. Thought he'd avenge his uncle by ambushing my car." My hands stilled. "What happened?" "Antonio saw him before he could act. Disarmed him, brought him to me." Sebastian's voice was flat, emotionless in the way that meant he was feeling too much. "He was crying, Sarah, begging for his life while explaining how his uncle had been the only family he had left." I resumed the massage, staying quiet while he processed. "I gave him a choice," Sebastian continued. "Leave the city tonight with enough money to start over somewhere else, or stay and face the consequences of coming after me. He left, took the money and ran. You let him go. I let him go." He turned to look at me, vulnerability naked in his expression. "Does that make me weak? Vincent would have killed him without hesitation. Most people in my position would have." I cupped his face, forcing him to maintain eye contact. "It makes you human. It makes you the man I fell in love with. The one who understands the difference between necessary violence and cruelty for its own sake. My father would have killed him. Said mercy to enemies creates more enemies. Your father isn't here, and you're not him. You've built something different, Sebastian. Brutal when required, but not needlessly cruel. That balance is what makes people loyal to you beyond simple fear. He pulled me from the chair onto his lap, burying his face against my neck. Sometimes I wonder if you see me too clearly, if you understand me better than I understand myself. I've been documenting you for 3 years. I probably do. I ran my fingers through his hair, feeling him gradually relax against me. What did the journal say tonight that has you so contemplative? I hesitated, then decided he deserved the truth. I was writing about change, about how 3 months ago, the thought of you killing someone horrified me on a visceral level. Now I analyze whether the violence was necessary, whether alternatives existed, whether the outcome protected our interests. I'm not sure when I started thinking of your empire as ours, instead of yours. Does that bother you? The shift in perspective? Yes and no. I'm becoming someone I wouldn't have recognized a year ago. Someone who can discuss murder over breakfast and attend nursing lectures in the afternoon without cognitive dissonance. But I'm also becoming someone who understands her own strength, who isn't crushed by debt and fear, who has purpose beyond survival. I pulled back to meet his eyes. You've given me that. This life, for all its complications, has given me that. Sebastian's kiss was soft, grateful. I have something for you. Was waiting for the right moment, but this feels right. He reached into his pocket, withdrawing a small velvet box that made my heart stutter. But when he opened it, instead of a ring, I found a key on a platinum chain. This opens a safety deposit box at First National, he explained, fastening the chain around my neck. Inside is documentation for a new identity, cash, and instructions for disappearing if something happens to me. Also contains a copy of your journal. I had it scanned and printed, stored separately from the original. The implications hit me like a physical blow. You think something's going to happen to you. I think I operate in a dangerous world where preparation is the difference between protection and tragedy. If rivals move against me, if law enforcement gets too close, if any number of scenarios I've planned for actually occur, you need options. His hands framed my face. The key means freedom, Sarah. Freedom to choose to stay or go, to remain Sarah Mitchell or become someone else entirely. I don't want to be someone else. Maybe not now, but if I'm gone, if staying becomes too dangerous, you need the option. Promise me you'll use it if necessary. I wanted to argue, to insist that I'd never leave, that we'd face any threat together. But I'd learned enough about his world to understand that some situations couldn't be faced together, that sometimes survival meant sacrifice. I promise, I whispered, feeling the weight of the key against my collarbone. But Sebastian, I'm not planning on needing it. Neither am I. But we plan for worst cases anyway. We sat in silence for a long moment, holding each other with the desperate intensity of people who understood how fragile safety really was. Finally, Sebastian stirred, glancing at the journal I'd set aside. Read me what you wrote. I want to hear how you're processing all this. I retrieved the journal, flipping to the entry I'd been working on. It's not polished, just stream of consciousness. That's what I want. Raw truth, not edited version. I took a breath, then began reading aloud. 3 months in Sebastian's world, and I'm learning that transformation isn't dramatic. It's incremental. Small compromises that accumulate until you look back and barely recognize the person you were. I used to think in absolute terms, right and wrong, good and evil, legal and criminal. Now I think in gradations of gray, evaluating context and consequence rather than applying blanket morality. Today in class, we discussed medical ethics. The professor asked when it's acceptable to break protocol, to violate established rules in service of a greater good. My classmates debated theoretical scenarios while I thought about Sebastian eliminating threats to protect dozens of people who depend on him for their livelihood. About how conventional morality would condemn him while ignoring the stability he provides to families whose breadwinners work in his organizations. I'm not naive enough to think he's a hero. He's not. He's a criminal who's hurt people, who will continue to hurt people when necessary. But he's also created order in chaos, provided structure where society offered only neglect. The neighborhoods he controls have lower crime rates than those outside his influence. The people who work for him are loyal not just from fear, but because he protects their interests in ways legitimate systems never did. Is that enough to justify the violence? I don't know. But I know I love him, and I've chosen to build a life in his world. That makes me complicit in everything he does, whether I pull the trigger myself or simply accept the protection his violence provides. Medical school is teaching me about healing. Sebastian is teaching me about survival. I'm not sure which lessons matter more, or if they're really separate things at all. Maybe healing and survival are the same in different contexts. Maybe the nurse who saves lives and the criminal who eliminates threats are both just trying to protect what matters to them. I wrote in an early entry that I loved Sebastian even knowing it could destroy me. 3 months later, I understand that destruction isn't about him. It's about choosing a life that requires shedding the comfortable illusions I used to believe about morality and justice. I'm not destroyed. I'm rebuilt. Different, harder, more clear-eyed about how the world actually works rather than how I wish it worked. And I'm okay with that. More than okay. I'm finally becoming someone who can protect herself, who understands power and how to wield it, who doesn't apologize for taking up space or having needs. Sebastian didn't create that person. She was always there, buried under debt and fear, and society's insistence that good people don't associate with dangerous men. He just gave her permission to exist. I finished reading and looked up to find Sebastian watching me with an expression I couldn't quite interpret. Pride, perhaps, or recognition of something in my words that resonated with his own experience. "You understand," he said simply. "Better than most people who've spent their entire lives in this world. The gray areas, the impossible choices, the way conventional morality fails when applied to unconventional circumstances. I understand that loving you means accepting all of you. The darkness and the light, the violence and the gentleness, the criminal, and the man who kept vigil by his sister's hospital bed when she needed him." His phone buzzed, the specific tone that meant urgent business. He glanced at it, his expression hardening. "I need to handle something. Won't be long." "Be careful," I said automatically, the words that had become ritual between us. Always. He kissed me once more, then was gone, leaving me alone with my journal and thoughts that were still too complicated to fully articulate. I turned to a fresh page, continuing the entry. Sebastian just left to handle another situation. I don't ask for details anymore unless he volunteers them. I've learned that some knowledge creates liability, and protecting me sometimes means keeping me ignorant of specifics. It should bother me more than it does. The not knowing, the accepting of information on a need-to-know basis. But I trust him. That's the fundamental shift that's occurred over these 3 months. I trust Sebastian to handle the darkness, so I don't have to. To make impossible decisions and live with the consequences. To protect our interests. And yes, I think of them as ours now. Through whatever means necessary. The key around my neck is a reminder that trust goes both ways. He's given me an escape route, insurance against worst-case scenarios. That level of preparation should be frightening. The acknowledgement that his world might become too dangerous for me, that circumstances might require my disappearance. Instead, it's oddly comforting. Sebastian plans for every contingency, including ones where I need to survive without him. That's love in his world. Not flowers and poetry, but practical protection that extends beyond his own life. I'm learning his language. The way he shows affection through preparation and security rather than conventional romance. The way his people demonstrate loyalty through competent violence rather than emotional declarations. The codes and hierarchies that govern everything. Invisible to outsiders, but clear as traffic laws once you understand them. 3 months ago, I was a waitress who'd accidentally texted an ultrasound to a dangerous man. Now I'm that dangerous man's partner, helping protect an empire built on blood and loyalty. The transformation should horrify me. It doesn't, and maybe that's the most telling change of all. Dawn was breaking by the time Sebastian returned, the sky outside bleeding pink and orange over the city. He looked exhausted, but satisfied. Whatever situation he'd handled apparently resolved to his satisfaction. "Everything okay?" I asked, looking up from where I'd been reviewing anatomy notes while waiting for him. "Everything's fine. Small territorial dispute that needed immediate attention." He moved to the coffee maker, preparing espresso with practiced efficiency. "How are the studies going?" "Good. Exam next week on cardiovascular systems. Antonio has been surprisingly helpful. Apparently, he did pre-med before deciding organized crime was more lucrative." Sebastian smiled at that. "Antonio's full of surprises. You should ask him about his mother sometime. She still thinks he's a legitimate security consultant. Is that what we're calling it? It's what we tell mothers and nosy relatives. Everyone else knows the truth." He brought me an espresso, prepared exactly how I'd grown to prefer it. "I've been thinking about what you read earlier, about transformation and complicity." I set aside my notes, giving him my full attention. "You asked once if choosing me meant you were becoming a monster," Sebastian continued, settling onto the couch beside my chair. "I don't think you are, but I think you're right that you're changing. We both are. You're teaching me that mercy isn't always weakness, that some threats can be neutralized without violence. I'm teaching you that survival sometimes requires hard choices that conventional morality would condemn. And together we're creating something new," I finished. "Neither purely criminal nor purely legitimate. Just ours." "Exactly." He reached for my hand, intertwining our fingers. "I have a proposition for you. Something I've been considering for a few weeks." The seriousness in his tone made my pulse quicken. "What kind of proposition?" "Marry me." The words hung in the air between us, simple but weighted with implications I was still processing. Marriage to Sebastian Dante would mean legal entanglement with everything he was. Formal recognition as his partner, not just in private, but publicly. "That's not a proposition," I said, my voice steadier than I felt. "That's a proposal." "Then let me do it properly." He slid from the couch to kneel beside my chair, still holding my hand. "Sarah Mitchell, will you marry me? Will you formalize what we've built over these 3 months? Accept the protections and complications that come with being legally recognized as mine?" I thought about the journal. 3 years of observations culminating in 3 months of active participation. About the key around my neck and what it represented. Sebastian's acknowledgement that loving me meant preparing for scenarios where I might need to survive without him. About the woman I'd become. Harder and clearer-eyed, but also stronger and more purposeful than the waitress who'd started documenting his world from a safe distance. "Yes," I said, the decision easier than it should have been. "On one condition." His expression turned wary. "What condition?" "I want to finish nursing school. Not as a hobby or something to fill time, but as a real career. I want to work in emergency medicine, use the skills I'm learning to help people." I held his gaze. "I need to balance the darkness of your world with something that creates light. Does that make sense?" Relief crossed his features. "Perfect sense. And Sarah, I wouldn't want you any other way. The fact that you're choosing to create rather than just exist in my world. That's exactly why I love you." He produced a ring from his pocket. Not flashy or ostentatious, but a simple platinum band with a single diamond that caught the morning light. It was perfect, understated but valuable. exactly what I would have chosen if asked. It was my grandmother's, he explained, sliding it onto my finger. The one who taught me to cook. She left it to me with instructions to give it to someone who understood both strength and mercy. I think she'd approve of you. I looked at the ring, feeling the weight of history and promise it represented. I wish I could have met her. She would have loved you, would have recognized in you what I see, someone who adapts without losing themselves, who survives without becoming cruel, who loves without illusions. We sat in comfortable silence as dawn fully broke over the city, the ring on my finger catching light and scattering it across Sebastian's office. 3 months ago, I'd been terrified, watching Sebastian kill to protect me and wondering if I could survive in his world. Now I was wearing his grandmother's ring and planning a future that acknowledged both the darkness and the light. The journal sat beside me, documentation of a transformation I was still processing. I picked it up, turning to the final page with blank space waiting to be filled. "What will you write about this?" Sebastian asked, watching me. "The truth. That I'm marrying a dangerous man who's killed people and will kill again when necessary. That I'm choosing this life with my eyes open, understanding the costs and accepting them. That love in your world looks different than conventional romance, but it's no less real for all its complications. And how do you feel about that truth?" I thought about it honestly, examining my emotions with the same clinical detachment I'd applied to 3 years of observations. Fear, yes, some. Doubt, occasionally. But underneath it all, a certainty I couldn't deny. "I feel like I finally found where I belong," I admitted. "For 3 years, I documented your world from the outside, fascinated and terrified in equal measure. Now, I'm on the inside, and it's harder and more complicated than I ever imagined. But it's also more real, more honest about what survival requires and what love demands." Sebastian pulled me from the chair onto his lap, the journal still clutched in my hands. "Write it down. All of it. Keep documenting our life together, the way you documented me from a distance. I want to read how you process this, how you navigate the complications, how you make peace with the darkness while maintaining your own light. Even when I'm critical, when I question your decisions or push back on things you consider necessary. Especially then. I don't want a yes woman, Sarah. I want you. All your questions and moral stands and refusal to simply accept things because I say they're necessary. That's the whole point of this partnership." I opened the journal to the final entry, beginning to write while still sitting in his lap. Sebastian asked me to marry him this morning. I said yes. 3 months ago, I watched him kill a man and wondered if I could survive in his world. Now I'm planning a wedding to one of the most dangerous men in the city, and I'm not afraid. Or rather, I'm afraid of the right things. Not Sebastian himself, but the threats we'll face together. Not the violence inherent in his world, but my own capacity to accept and participate in it. Not losing myself in his darkness, but finding that maybe I was always meant for this life and just needed permission to acknowledge it. The journal that started as documentation of observations from a safe distance has become a record of transformation. From waitress to partner, from observer to participant, from someone who watched Sebastian's world with fascinated horror to someone helping protect and build it. I'm not the same woman who accidentally texted an ultrasound to the wrong number 3 months ago. That woman was naive, drowning in debt, convinced she deserved nothing better than exhausting survival. This woman understands power and how to wield it, accepts necessary violence while maintaining boundaries about cruelty, loves without illusions, and plans without fear. This woman is marrying Sebastian Dante, is becoming part of his empire formally, not just as mistress or companion, but as wife and partner. And she's doing it with full knowledge of what that means. The complications, the dangers, the moral compromises that will be required. The diary I shouldn't have left behind nearly got me killed, but it also gave me everything I never knew I needed. Purpose, partnership, a love that acknowledges darkness while creating light. A future built on brutal honesty rather than comfortable lies. 3 years of documentation culminating in this moment. The final entry of one life, the first entry of another. From observer to participant. From alone to partnered. From surviving to living. And I'm ready for all of it. I closed the journal, setting it aside, as Sebastian kissed me with the gentle intensity that had become familiar over 3 months of learning each other. Outside, the city was waking up, his empire continuing its complex dance of legitimate business and shadow operations, the two worlds existing simultaneously, like they always had. But now I was part of both. The nursing student who would save lives in emergency rooms. The wife of a dangerous man who would protect those lives through violence when necessary. Not contradictory roles, but complementary ones. Two sides of the same coin called survival, in a world more complicated than simple morality could accommodate. The key around my neck represented one kind of insurance. Escape if necessary. Survival if Sebastian fell. The ring on my finger represented another. Commitment to stay. To build something together that acknowledged both our capacities for darkness and light. I didn't know what the future held. Couldn't predict what challenges we'd face or what impossible choices would be required. But I knew I'd face them alongside Sebastian, documenting our life together with the same honest observation I'd applied to 3 years of watching him from a distance. The diary I shouldn't have left behind had changed everything, had brought me from crushing debt and exhausting survival to this penthouse. This man. This complicated life that was somehow exactly what I needed. And as Sebastian carried me to bed, the journal temporarily forgotten on his desk, I made peace with the final truth I'd been avoiding. I hadn't been destroyed by loving a dangerous man. I'd been completed by it. Found the missing pieces of myself I'd been too afraid to acknowledge. The strength, the moral flexibility, the capacity for darkness that existed alongside my desire to heal and help. 3 years of documentation had led me here, to partnership with someone who understood both my light and my shadow, to a life that required constant navigation between conventional morality and survival reality, to love that demanded honesty about what we both were and what we'd both become. The waitress who'd started this journal was gone. In her place stood someone stronger, clearer-eyed, more complete. Someone ready to be Mrs. Sebastian Dante, with all the complications and compromises that title required. And I was ready. Finally, fully, without reservation. The diary I shouldn't have left behind had given me everything. Now it was time to live the story instead of just documenting it.